Today on CityCast Chicago, we're breaking down the Chicago Teachers Union's next contract, the major challenges of the city's immigration courts, and we can't wait to pull up on the Tamale Ladies' new spot in Pilsen. It's Friday, April 4th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Joining me to make sense of all of these stories from WBEZ Assistant Managing Editor Kate Grossman. Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you. We also have our friend from Injustice Watch investigative reporter Kelly Garcia in the building. Kelly, welcome back.
Yeah, always a pleasure to be here.
If you are new to the CityCast Chicago podcast, first and foremost, where the hell you been? We've been sitting here rocking, waiting for you these last 4 years and 1,000+ episodes, but we're glad you finally made it over to this side. If you are not new to this, but true to this, we appreciate you being back. Every single week, Monday through Friday, we are going across the city of Chicago, whether we are talking about spring cleaning, whether you're getting a guide to some of our favorite things to do this month, or like every single Friday, we're sitting down with these amazing voices to talk about some really important stories and to share our good news. But before we get into today's episode, earlier this week, like I said, we gave our guide to April. Some of the things we're looking forward to this month, whether it's National Record Store Day on April 12th, whether it's Indie Bookstore Day on April 26th. So I wanted to pose the question to y'all. What is something you're looking forward to this month? Kate, I'm going to start with you.
I love Chicago in April because, you know, we're starting to emerge from our winter cocoon. And one of my favorite spots is Winamac Park on Chicago's north side. We have these beautiful weeping willow trees and these little sort of nature areas. I watch the whole season, like as they begin to grow. And so at this time, like I begin to see the beginnings of the buds. And so I really love that in April when they start to come out. So I look forward to that.
This time of year, whether it's cherry blossoms, whether it's the tulips on the ground, starting to see Chicago get some of its color back. Across the city, in planters, out on the lakefront, in the parks across the city. It's one of my favorite parts of the year. I'm all the way in with you. Kelly, what about you? What's something you are looking forward to this month?
I live in Pilsen, and one thing that I really miss about living up north is having closer access to the beach and just being able to like take a walk by the lakefront. And so I'm challenging myself this month to like take a trip to the lakefront and just take a really long walk. When I was in college, I would walk from Lincoln Park all the way down to the museum campus, and it was just provided so much mental clarity. So I'm trying to push myself back to the lakefront. It's hard when you're like a little ways into the city, but I want to take advantage of the great weather. So
I feel you, Kelly. I can't wait to get out there and get to enjoy it for longer periods of time throughout the day. Something else I am looking forward to. I was saying it all last month, but it feels like it is getting closer and closer. One of my best friends, Cecil Bletcher, we went to high school together. We went to college together. He is starring in his first ever play in the city of Chicago. He has done plays in Kansas City and New York and Atlanta, but he is finally coming home to star in his first play called Bust. And I'm so excited. His partner and his wife, Renika Bletcher, is also starring in the play. So it's going to be a double whammy to get to see two of my best friends in this city for an extended run. The play kicks off later this month and is going to run through May at the Goodman. I'm really looking forward to that this month. Every single week, we like to bring in these amazing Chicagoans to look back on some key stories that they were paying attention to this week. And I think we have to start with the tentative contract being agreed to by the Chicago Teachers Union. For the last year plus, we have talked about what felt like a triangle conversation between the Chicago Teachers Union, led by CTU President Stacey Davis Gates. You had City Hall, Mayor Brandon Johnson. And then you also had Chicago Public Schools, which, you know, in previous contract negotiations, people would say that Chicago Public Schools and City Hall were moving lockstep with one another. But this time around, it felt like there was more division between the two, with Chicago Public Schools, of course, being led by the soon to be ousted CEO, Pedro Martinez. So, Kate, can you jump in here with a tentative agreement on the table? One, what do we need to know about it? And two, did we learn anything from this process?
Well, yes, it has been a very long process. It's been just a year. Negotiations started in April of last year. So it's been very long, although by other city negotiation standards, I think the firefighters still don't have a contract after almost 4 years. So I guess by that standard, this is pretty good. But
You're right.
so what we need to know is that last evening, the House of Delegates for the CTU, which is their body of all the representatives from all the schools, approved the contract. So now it's going to be sent to all the members, the 30,000 members of the CTU, for ratification vote. So that's the last step, and that'll be next week. Who knows? But usually those things pass. So that is, good news for a school system and a city that has seen, a lot of instability in terms of the adults at the top, right? Not, good news is it hasn't really affected schools so much, but there's been like just tremendous turmoil, at the school board. And as you mentioned, this conflict between City Hall and the CPS, all year long, really since August. So I guess the question, what did we learn? I mean, as you mentioned, like the paradigm has really shifted. Like I've been covering education in Chicago for more than 20 years. And as you said, during that time, the school board was always controlled by the mayor. So it was always mayor, school board, one team, CTU, other team, right? And so now this year, that was all mixed up, right? And so basically the mayor and the CTU were on one team and the head of CPS were kind of on another team. So I guess we learned like some things change, right? It's not always going to be the same. I guess in terms of the contract itself, everybody's declaring victory, right? Like CTU is, this is a transformational contract. The CPS is saying, we held the line. CTU wanted everything. We can't afford it. We're staring down the barrel of like major, major budget deficits, in the school year that's, coming up in the fall. They're already working on that budget now, and they are looking at serious financial difficulties. So their CPS is saying like they wanted everything and we only gave them a little bit. And the mayor's office is kind of in lockstep with CTU saying, this is transformational. I think the reality is it really is a compromise contract in the end.
Mm-hmm.
CPS did hold the line. They didn't give CTU most of what they wanted in terms of money stuff. Basically, like they wanted a lot more extra positions, and CPS certainly gave them some. The estimate is 800 to 900 new positions over the life of the 4-year contract. But I don't remember the number, but it was in the thousands that, many thousands that CTU had originally asked for. They did give them, the salary is a 4 to 5% raises each year over 4 years. And that's on top of the raises the teachers also get. Like you get an annual increase each year for experience. So teachers could get up to 7 or 8% raises every year. And the CTU I think is accurate when they say they got a lot of provisions in a wide range of areas. So, they got more librarians, they got more tech coordinators, they got new class limit, they lowered class limits. So they got a lot of things that will hopefully improve the quality of the classroom experience. And that's really important, of course.
That's a big deal. CTU President Stacey Davis Gates said many times that she felt that this contract negotiation was, in many ways, the strongest the union has been able to stand up for more wraparound services, arguing for things that are not just about the teacher and the student in the classroom, but about the things that surround that. I understand it was a compromise and CTU had much bigger dreams, but it does feel like in some ways ending this with your opposition leader being fired and on their way out the door and securing some of your protections. I don't know. It feels like CTU is able to stand there with a little more, kind of pump on their chest.
Yeah, I think upon reflection, like over time, CTU will, be able to come out the winner, I think, in this. But I don't think it's transformational. I think it helps certainly in very positive ways, like the class size thing. I think can be really meaningful. I think it's great to get more librarians. That's something they've been really fighting for. I think there's lots of little pockets of changes that hopefully will make a difference. Um, I'm not convinced it's transformational, but I agree. I think on balance, they got a lot of things in a lot of different areas that hopefully will move the needle on making for a better experience for kids and teachers in the classroom.
You know me, I've always got a book or two or three I'm either reading or suggesting. And we will always pull for the local independent Chicago bookstores. But hey, I get it. With busy schedules, shopping online can be convenient. And with bookshop.org, you don't have to choose. Bookshop.org lets you choose an independent bookstore or an organization to order from, and your purchase directly supports them. I'm sitting right here looking at their map right now, and they got some of my favorite spots like Burst Into Books in Roseland, Bookies in Beverly, Pilsen Community Books, Women and Children First in Andersonville, and so many more. So whether you're looking for something to help you understand the world or you're just looking for a fun spring break read, Bookshop.org can help you find the perfect book and support these community institutions at the same time. Plus, if you use code CityCast, you'll get 15% off your next order at bookshop.org. I'm about to use it right now. Kelly, I want to turn attention to you. For the last few months, we have been talking about the increased pressures, harassment, arrests of Chicago's immigrant community. So many have been put on what feels like constant paranoia watch, constant concern for their family members, their safety, regardless of what their protection status in the U.S. is. The federal government has shown that they are willing to go after people indiscriminately and then sort of paint the broad picture that, all of these individuals are criminals and need to be kicked out. Like they've shown how they plan to carry this out during this administration. You wrote a piece recently about what it means to navigate Chicago's immigration courts and just how deeply complicated it is. Can you kind of talk us through what it looks like for someone to go in front of a judge in one of these courts?
You're right. There's been a lot of talk on immigration recently, and I think one area that we at Injustice Watch wanted to focus on was immigration court specifically. I started observing about 2-3 months ago now, and I'm someone who speaks English, who has observed court hearings in other venues before, so I thought I was going to be able to walk in and kind of understand how it works immediately, but it was very confusing from the get-go. One of the big things that I've observed at immigration court is how different it is from criminal court, right? I think, I know we reference immigration court as like a court, but it's not really a court in the way that we think about it. People in immigration court are not entitled to an attorney paid for by the government. So like in any civil court, if you walk into immigration court and you can't afford an attorney, you're going to have to represent yourself. So you're talking about people who are new to the country, who might not speak English, who might not be familiar with the legal process here, and are now having to represent themselves before a judge who is going to decide whether or not they're going to be removed from the country, and if so, if they qualify for any relief from that process. These hearings happen fairly quickly, especially for people who don't have an attorney, because they're not fully aware of what rights and what options exist for them. A big issue too is fraud, and that's something that we talk about in the explainer. I have talked to several people at immigration court who have told me that they spent thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars, to hire an attorney or to get legal advice, only to realize at the end that it was actually a scam. And that's a pretty common problem actually across the country, is because there's a shortage of immigration attorneys, right? There's people who take advantage of vulnerable people. So that's something that we talk about in the explainer. There are resources for people. We do suggest, do your research. There are ways to figure out if someone is a licensed attorney. And, if you think you have been a victim of a fraud, there are some avenues you can take to file a complaint. Another issue, of course, is language access. Like I said, a lot of people who are going to immigration court don't speak English as their first language. And so most of the people that I talk to are speaking Spanish. There are also other people who speak Creole, Mandarin, Russian, Ukrainian. I will say the immigration court does a fairly good job of providing interpreters, and they have to. People have a right to an interpreter during their court hearings. But I will say at the last hearing I was at, I heard the judge mention that there are some limitations now to getting automatic interpreters. In other words, like, someone walks in, they don't speak English, they speak Creole, for example. Like, the judge is able to call an interpreter on the spot to provide interpretation services, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case moving forward. So there's a lot of, and this is true for the entire immigration system, but there's a lot that's up in the air. There's a lot that we need clarity on too, and there's a lot that's changing. We make a reference to that in the explainer as well, that this is information that we know is accurate right now, information that we know the government is standing by right now, but that might not be true tomorrow. There's a lot of instability, and that's very stressful for people. This process of going through immigration court takes years. On average, someone who's seeking asylum takes an average of 4 years to resolve their case. So that's a long time for someone who doesn't know whether or not they have permission to stay in the country, right? So, we're hoping to continue going to immigration court. I'm going every week, and we're hoping to continue exploring other issues that are happening there.
One thing you pointed out in here that I had read about and I've seen, but I really thought about more, you were breaking down the fraud that takes place on like the back end of the immigration court system, because so much when we're talking about people who are seeking asylum, people who have made their way, we're talking about the fraud or the scamming that may happen on their route here, right? People who promise to bring them over safely. And so little is talked about, or less is talked about, it feels, about the worker exploitation they face when they get here, the scammers who try to swindle them out of hundreds, thousands of dollars, life savings, to promise them help navigating the court system, just to sort of leave them holding their empty pockets. And I don't know, like once you kind of remind yourself of all of these different challenges, it really spits in the face of this narrative that tries to paint asylum seekers and immigrants and people in this country as anything other than courageous and brave and willing to sacrifice. People cannot imagine what most people's journey to this country looks like, who end up maybe at the southern border trying to seek asylum, have no idea what it is like to try to figure out temporary housing when the federal government, the local government, the local police, the local immigration system, it feels like everything is all opposition is slanted against you. Just how vulnerable they are to someone else's choices and decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a great point about immigration judges specifically. One thing I learned throughout this process is that immigration judges, they're not really judges. They're appointed by the U.S. Attorney General. They're employees of the Department of Justice. So in many ways, they're acting under the authority of the administration. They're a part of the executive branch. So they're not as independent as we like to think judges are. And especially right now, judges are under immense pressure to deliver on the promise for mass deportation. So
it almost feels like we shouldn't even be calling it a court.
Yeah,
it's like you can't get an attorney, might not get an interpreter. There's no jury. The judge is barely a judge. Like, it feels like immigration courts is just the nomenclature we gave it for it to make sense to people. But it really feels like it's just like a transitionary room where your fate is decided, and court is just the easiest word for people to attach to.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you're not aligned with the administration's agenda, as an immigration judge, you can be fired at any moment. And we're seeing that right now. Chicago's immigration court only has 17 judges. They actually had 20 at the top of the year. So they're losing judges and they're not being replaced. So that kind of gives you an idea of, how bad it's really going to get over there.
speaking about the impact the Trump administration is having on agencies, institutions, organizations, Northwestern, like other universities, has faced so much pressure. As the federal administration has said, we are cracking down on student protesters. We are pulling funding for anything that looks like it has anything to do with equity or diversity, which essentially means Black people, women, the queer community. And now Northwestern is once again in the crosshairs of an congressional investigation. Kate, can you kind of break down this most recent update?
So Northwestern got a letter last week from this committee on education and workforce, which is the same committee that's doing all the work around anti-Semitism. And they said that they are investigating the law school's legal clinics. There's more than 20 of them. And these are clinics that do mostly, I think, free advocacy work for people who can't afford an attorney. The phrase, I'll read it, just make sure I get it right. They said, there are indications that Northwestern has used taxpayer-supported institutional resources to, quote, engage in progressive left political advocacy. So that's their charge. And they're asking for the names of donors. They're asking for budgets. They're specifically asking for the personnel files for the professor who leads one of the clinics in particular, a civil rights clinic. So they're really going after these clinics. So Patrick Smith from WBZ did a story about it, and he talked to a few different legal experts about this and its ramifications. And what they said was that this is really their concerns. This is really going to have a chilling effect because it's unlikely that there are going to be all these documents available, but it's going to, every university across the country that has these kind of clinics is going to wonder, like, am I next? And if you're a funder, right, are you going to want your name potentially out there? This is going to have a chilling effect on all these kind of clinics, which obviously can stop the work, prevent students from having these learning experiences, which obviously propels people to do this kind of work after they graduate from law school. It's also an attack on free speech because in this letter, meaning this congressional committee, specifically cited one case where one of these clinics had represented like a pro-Palestinian activist. And in their defense, Northwestern, folks who are speaking on behalf of Northwestern are saying, like, these are nonpartisan clinics. They represent people of all, political persuasions, or just, they're just regular people, often people who don't have a voice, and that this is not a political partisan issue. That's what Northwestern said when Patrick asked, like, will you comply? They didn't say. So that's, something to keep an eye on. We don't know if they're going to share all these documents. But, like with many things the Trump administration has done, I mean, they often bring the hammer down and, withhold federal funding, which is really what they're doing at Northwestern. They have many hammers hanging over Northwestern at the moment to withdraw federal funding. But it's the threat that really is the most concerning because it causes this retrenchment on campus, which is what we're already seeing at Northwestern.
Yeah, I just want to say it plainly for people listening. If you think this congressional committee gives us slight damn at all about anti-Semitism, they do not. If you think that this effort to protect Jewish students on campus is genuine, it is not. Let's be real. This is about a larger campaign moving towards authoritarianism. It is about the federal government making it clear that it is our way, right? The right way or the highway. And so I want people, as they see these continue and growing attacks on universities, that if you are somehow, like sort of in the middle, thinking that they care about protecting free speech, that is not what this is about. And that is not me saying that people have not experienced anti-Semitism, because in the same ways people have experience xenophobia in the same ways that people are experiencing the worses of American racism and sexism. But what I am saying is that the government's reaction, attack on protests, attack on universities, while at the same time letting thousands of people go free who violently stormed the Capitol, those realities don't align. I really appreciate, Kate, you and all of your colleagues doing more and more to make us kind of understand the nuance of what's taking place, not only the policies from the federal government to universities, but how different universities are reacting. And so we will continue to follow all of this. We will be talking with education reporter Lisa Phillip very soon. Kelly, over to you. The Chicago Reader wrote about Illinois' first and only girls' juvenile detention facility, which closed 50 years ago. And yet there's something we can still learn from this place. Can you talk to us about this story?
It's a very beautifully written, well-researched piece from Katie, and it goes into the history of this girls' prison in Geneva, and it existed for close to 100 years, I want to say. It was from 1897 to 1977, so it really doesn't feel like that too long ago. And even at its later years, it was actually a co-ed prison. It was actually one of the youth prisons we have still today. And so it really does make you wonder about that history, how the kids are being treated today in those youth prisons. She brings us into the story through the perspective of a young girl who actually tried to run away from the prison in the early 20th century, and she actually ended up dying after a failed attempt to run away. And the story is told through a bunch of research that she did, I think through the Geneva History Museum, but also through conversations with survivors, people who actually worked at the facility. There was one anecdote with Ron Camacho, was one of the boys who was actually at the facility before it closed. And she describes a trip that she took with Ron back to the site of the prison, which is actually now, it's been developed into mansions, private property. The cemetery where the girls and the infants who died at the facility is still there. And so when Katie and Ron went to the site, Ron immediately recognized it. It's been decades since he was back, but it just based on the writing alone, it seemed like he could immediately tell where he was. I didn't know about this history. I don't think a lot of people know about that history of Geneva's girls' prison. It makes you wonder about all the other, parts of our history that are not being told and that are being reframed. The one thing that I really appreciated about her writing and her reporting on this is her reframing of the Geneva's girls' school not being a school, really, right? It's a prison.
100%.
Right? And that made me think a lot about today's juvenile detention center in Cook County. The Juvenile Detention Center has a high school, right? When you think about it through the perspective of CPS, it's actually a Nancy B. Jefferson high school where kids get education, they get programming, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it's a jail. It's a jail for kids, right? So I really appreciated that reframing. She actually added a writer's note about, her journey writing the piece as well. I just really appreciate that kind of narrative writing, investigative journalism, really. And I appreciated her patience with the story and all the work she did for it.
Yeah, I just finished Dr. Eve Ewing's original Sins, and it asks the questions like, what are the role of schools, right? And then particularly, what are the role of schools for Black and Indigenous young people? And ultimately, one of the things we learn is that our schooling system is largely built on a carceral framework, that the boarding schools that Native Americans and Indigenous people were forced into, kidnapped from their homes and forced into, those were essentially prisons of a different name. The early school systems that the formerly enslaved and the newly free were were subjected to, they were largely prisons of the mind, of the body, of their culture, of their burgeoning culture, the culture that, they fought to maintain and build amongst each other. And when I look at this story, right, no matter what name they put on it, State Home for Juvenile Female Offenders, the Illinois State Training School for Girls, Illinois Youth Center in Geneva, this was a place of incarceration, right? And I think, as you mentioned, whether we are, moving towards the juvenile detention center in Cook County, or if we think about the logics that our public school systems are built off on, the type of disciplinary actions that are allowed inside of schools, we have to continue to challenge the carceral framework that undergirds our schooling system if we truly want to build places that are about providing safety, providing knowledge, and providing opportunity to young people.
Another interesting piece of the story, too, is the types of criminal offenses or criminal behavior that was defined at the time is still very similar to today, right? A lot of the girls who were at the Geneva Girls Prison were there for truancy, minor crimes. They were also there if they were homeless, if they were there because they were runaways, if they were there because they were engaging in any kind of sexual activity, if they were queer. If they had any kind of mental health issue. They were there for a lot of other reasons other than just, criminal offenses. And that does make you wonder about the types of reasons why kids now are in their ward of states, or if they're at the juvenile detention center, right? It does make you wonder, right? What has really changed since the early 20th century?
Every single episode of CityCast Chicago ends the same way, and that's with some good news. Kate, I'm going to start with you. What is your good news for CityCast Chicago today?
I picked a story that the Sun-Times did, and it just made me feel good. And I hope it makes other people feel good. It's just a lovely story about a CPS high school senior who got a really nice college scholarship from the National Honor Society because she started a nonprofit called Living Outside, where they give care packages of like treats and like hygiene stuff to folks who are homeless. And they specifically called, I think she started with her sister, like Living Outside, to sort of like help destigmatize the notion of being homeless. And also the story said that they had a personal connection. I guess her uncle had been homeless, who later passed away. So that was, really sad, but, beautiful that she turned it into action.
Yeah. Shout out to Bella Brown. If you want to read more on this story, again, you know where to find it. And shout out to the author, Sydney Hernandez, as well. Kelly, your good news involves the iconic Tamale lady, Omega Suarez. Tell us what your good news is today.
One of my favorite Tamale ladies in Pilsen, she actually just opened up her own storefront. You probably know this lady. She's the one on Damon and 21st. Her tamales are iconic. Every time I go, there's like a long line, so you have to get there early. But now she has her own very little storefront, and she has some chairs and tables in there, and so you can sit down and eat, enjoy your food. I believe it's at 1932 West Cermak. Yes, it is. Just opened up last week, so definitely go check it out. Go support her. She's been selling tamales in Pilsen for many, many years. So, this is definitely a moment of pride for the community. And
I love that the store is called The Tamale Lady.
The Tamale Lady.
That's right on the sign when you walk up on the store, and it is so beautiful. And I love the little cartoon character as well.
Yeah, the graphics are great. Great.
I was on the Instagram and they was like, "Is this the lady on Damon the 21st?" And she commented and she was like, "Yes, it is me, and we are here and we are excited. Come pull up on us." So I definitely will be. We will drop a link to the address in the story in our show notes. I'm going to round us out today, and I just wanted to give a huge thank you to all of the CityCast Chicago members who pulled up on us yesterday night for our membership event. We really appreciate all of your support over the last few weeks, celebrating 1,000 episodes in 4 years. I'm gonna be real, has been exhausting. We came up with the list. We put it out. Today, you'll see me on WGN talking about it. But I really want to let everyone know how much we are grateful for the love you all have shown us, all of the texts, the voicemails, the emails, all of the kind of things you all said last night. Again, thank y'all for supporting the podcast. If you are new here, hey, welcome. I hope you enjoyed. We're going to be here bright and early next week, Monday through Friday, doing what we do best. But before we do that, we want to thank the people who really help us make this show possible. And every single week, those are our wonderful guests. From WBEZ Assistant Managing Editor, Kate Grossman. Kate, we appreciate you making time.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And from Injustice Watch, investigative reporter Kelly Garcia. Kelly, thank you so much for stopping by.
Always a fun time. Thanks for having me.
I got to thank the people who make CityCast Chicago possible. Our executive producer is Simone Alicea. Our producer is Michelle Navarro. Our roving producer this week was Elizabeth Kama. Our social media manager is Rick Homuth. And our Hey Chicago newsletter editor for her final week was Ava Winowski. Ava, we appreciate all you've done during this period. It means the world that you've gotten to join our small little team and help us continue to create the best version of Hey Chicago possible. Good luck in your next role, my friend. The music we all love is from Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. Additional music this week by Sarah the Instrumentalist and Gloria Tales, courtesy of EpidemicSound.com. My last thank you, as it is every single week, is for you, the people who listen to CityCast Chicago, whether it's 1 time speed, 1.25, 1.5, 2 time. If you anything higher than 2 times, you're bugging, you're tripping. Why would you want to listen to any human being talk that fast? Can you even keep up with it? However, whatever your preference is, I appreciate you for making CityCast Chicago one of your weekly podcasts. We're going to be back bright and early on Monday to talk about all of the drama and chaos happening on college campuses and universities across the country. We'll talk to you then. Peace.